Hello and welcome to a Talmud Israeli production. Today we'll review the highlights of this week's course of Daf Yomi study, Masechet Nedarim, pages 12 through 18, Yud Bet through Yud Chet. 12. Amar Shmuel, Lach mei toda she'afan be'arba chalot yatsa. If a person were to bake the loaves that are associated with the Thanksgiving offering and make 4 large loaves, you satisfy your obligation thereby. Vaktiv arba'im, but wait a second. The Torah says, or rather the Torah doesn't say, but we interpret from the Torah that there must be arba'im, not 4 loaves, but 40 loaves. So the Gemara says, la mitzvah, well, ideally you would break up the supply of baked goods into 40 separate loaves. But if you didn't, you simply took each one of the 4 varieties and made 1 large loaf out of it rather than break it into 10, that would be sufficient. So Rashi explains, mitzvah toshi arba'im. Really, there should be 40, 10 times 4. However, if you made 4 different types, each one very large, mikolmin, one of each type, yatsa, good enough. No need to break them into separate pieces. Yud Gimel, 13. Tanya Mishum Rabbi, Amru minayin lanolad bechor betoch beito shemitzvah lahakdisho. How do you know that if a firstborn animal, was born into your flock, that you have an obligation lahakdisho to sanctify that animal? Shene'emar hazachar tagdish. You shall sanctify the firstborn male. Now, this does not mean that absent the sanctification of the Bechor, that the animal is not going to be Kodesh. That's going to happen no matter what, just by virtue of being the firstborn animal, the Bechor. However, we're talking about the obligation that the person, the owner, has, and here we're saying that in addition to whatever happens to the animal automatically, there is an affirmative obligation for the owner to be makdish, to perform a verbal act of sanctification. Yud Daled, 14. Tanya, hanoder ba Torah, if someone vows by the Torah, in the name of the Torah, lo amar klum, that means nothing. That's not in God's name, that's in the name of the Torah. Doesn't count. V'amar Rabbi Yochanan, tzarich she'ela lachacham. However, we require that if a person were to make such a neder, that they get it annulled by the good offices of a chacham, a sage. Hatarat nedarim. V'amar Rabbi Nachman, however, a Torah scholar need not burden himself with getting such a neder annulled. Why? Because the Talmud Chacham knows that when you make a neder b'Torah, but in the name of the Torah, that it is halachically insignificant. Only a person who's not a Chacham, who wouldn't know any better, we want them to go through the hassle of Natarat Nedarim, so they shouldn't be in the practice of doing this or thinking that this was real. Okay. Tet Vav. 15. Tanya, if an action is permitted, but other people nagu bahen isur, treat it as a prohibition, they treat it strictly, iata rashai latiram bifnehem, you are not allowed to permit these things in their presence. Shenemar lo yachel divaro, you shall not profane. He shall not profane his word. So this is an important religious concept, that we have laws of the Torah which are absolute, black letter law, you must do this, you cannot do that. And there are rabbinic rules which are absolute. And then there are areas of religious life where people take on additional practices or prohibitions that are not technically required, but are treated very strictly and very seriously by a group of Jews, by a community. And to run afoul of that behavior in their presence were to make a mockery of their customs and their practices. So the halacha says, don't do that. Even if it's permitted, but other people take it seriously and prohibit, don't be cavalier about it in their presence. It's not right. Tet Zayin, 16. Chomer b'nedarim mib'shvuot. In some ways, a neder, a vow, is more serious than an oath. Ketzad, how so? Amar konam sukkah sheni oseh. If a person says konam, a prohibition, a vow, to prohibit the sukkah that I'm building, or the lulav that I'm taking, lulav sheni totel, tefillin sheni maniach, or the tefillin that I'm going to wear. But when it comes to a neder, that neder holds true. That sukkah is off limits to you. That tefillin is off limits to you. That lulav is off limits to you. Okay. However, when it comes to shavuot, mutar. a person can utilize the sukkah, the lulav, the tefillin. Why? Because when it comes to the shvuah, you'd be forbidding the person himself from acting upon a mitzvah of tefillin, lulav, and sukkah. But a person has religious obligations that they can't take a shvuah to undo. So the Gemara says, "Nishbain lavor lamitzvot," you are not allowed to take an oath that would thereby cause you to violate the laws of Judaism and neglect positive mitzvot. So when it comes to a neder, and the issue is just that particular item, okay, so be it. But when it comes to a shvuah, to prohibit you from doing a mitzvah, you can't ever make a valid shvuah to prohibit you from doing a mitzvah. Yud Zayin, 17. Mish Nazar Shtei Nazirot. If you took an oath, 2 oaths of asceticism to be a Nazir. Now, a Stam Nazirut is 30 days if you don't clarify how long it should be for. And you did it twice, so it's going to have to be 60 days. 30 plus another 30. Manat Rishona, if you counted the 30 days and properly fulfilled the laws of Nazirut, Ve'ifrish Korban, and then you separated the Korban, the sacrifice which goes at the end of the term of Nazirut, V'nishal Aleh, but then you asked a sage to annul that vow of Nazirut, and the sage annulled it, so now it never happened. It happened, but it's like it never really happened. Alta lo shniya. Barishona. So now, the 30 days that you actually did can count to satisfy the second obligation, and the korban which you separated for the first one is now going to go for the second one, and your period of Nazirut is over. So what should have been 60 days, 30 plus 30, turned out to be 30 plus an annulment, and you're in the clear. 18, Yudchet. Stam Nedarim lahachmir, upirasham lahakel. A neder is understood to be strictly enforced. When there's ambiguity, we will interpret it in a strict fashion. However, if the person who made the neder clarifies that their intent was something other than what might have been thought, then we will listen to their clarification to provide a lenient interpretation. So, for example, Harei alai kitruma. This item should be to me like truma. Well, ikitruma talishka, neder aser. If he made the vow thinking that the truma in question is truma talishka, donations to the temple, then for sure this item that he says is like truma is totally off limits to him, like hekdesh. Vim shel goren mutu. However, if he said it's like the truma of the goren of the granary, which goes to the kohen, is not to the mikdash, then it could be permitted. We can have a lenient interpretation. However, if he didn't have any particular interpretation, he just said like truma, we have to go strict. Divrei Rabbi Meir, so says Meir. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Stam truma b'Yehuda asura. If you didn't have any particular intention when you mentioned that it should be like truma, and you live in the land of Judea, where the temple is, then we're going to be strict because they know about the truma dalishka, the donations to the temple. But Galil, however, if it's in the Galilee, muteret, then if it was just truma, but you didn't clarify what, you didn't even know you were thinking, then it's going to be permitted. We'll assume it's like the goren, like the truma of the granary. Why? Because the people who live in the Galilee, very far removed from the temple, don't know anything about the truma talishka. In their minds, truma means granary. It doesn't mean truma talishka, the one associated with the Beit HaMikdash. Everyone have a great week.